There's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. It comes from forgetting who you are. It's that quiet ache behind your eyes when no one's watching. That heavy stillness in your chest when the world keeps spinning, but you don't. You try to name it. Maybe it's burnout. Maybe you're tired. Maybe it's depression again. But deep down, you know. It's not just sadness. It's not even pain. It's the strange emptiness of being alive without actually being here. Like watching your life from behind a glass wall. You smile, you nod, you go through the motions, but none of it feels like you. And that's the part no one sees. Not your friends, not your partner, not even you sometimes. Because you've gotten so good at surviving, you forgot what it means to exist, to breathe and feel it, to speak and mean it, to look in the mirror and not feel like a stranger. You keep telling yourself you're just off, that maybe it'll pass, but it lingers, like a shadow that never quite leaves. And the scariest part isn't that you're empty, it's that you don't remember what it ever felt like to be full. You scroll, you numb, you distract, but nothing fills that quiet space inside you, because that space isn't calling for noise. It's calling for you, not the version that performs, not the version they praise, not the version that fits, the real you, the one that got buried under years of becoming what the world needed, but not what you needed. And what if this ache isn't something broken? What if it's not depression, not failure, not weakness? What if this emptiness isn't the end of you, but the first time you've felt how far you've drifted from yourself? What if this is where it begins? Not healing, not fixing, not chasing, just remembering, just listening, just being, right here, in the silence. Where you finally hear the voice you forgot was yours. Let me show you. You weren't born wearing a mask. You didn't come into this world needing to prove your worth. That came later, slowly, quietly, like fog rolling in, one moment at a time. First, someone said you were too much. Then, someone else made you feel like not enough. So you adjusted. You softened the parts of you that were loud, sharpened the edges that felt too soft. You learned to read the room before you spoke. You learned to smile even when it hurt. You learned to become who they needed, not because you were fake, but because being yourself started to feel dangerous. They called it maturity. They called it being polite. But deep down, it was something else. It was self-abandonment dressed up as acceptance. And it worked for a while. You were praised. You were liked. You fit in. But with every yes that should have been a no, with every silence that should have been a scream, a piece of you drifted further away. Until one day, you looked around and realized you'd built a life that looked beautiful from the outside, but you didn't recognize the person living it. This is the glass cage. You can move, you can breathe, you can function, but you can't feel. Because feeling would mean remembering the parts of you you've hidden. And remembering would mean risking everything you've built. So you keep playing the role, the good friend, the calm one, the achiever, the caretaker. You say the right things, you laugh at the right jokes, but behind your eyes, there's a quiet theater playing a very different scene. A version of you screaming, "This isn't who I am." Not because you're fake, but because you're tired of being a character in someone else's script. And maybe you've started to wonder, what would happen if you stopped performing? If you let the mask slip, even for a moment? Would they still love you? Would they stay? Would you stay? These questions aren't small. They crack something open, not just in your mind, but in your soul. Because the truth is, you can't keep living in a version of yourself designed to be accepted by people who don't even see the real you. You can't heal in a house built on pretending. And maybe that's the real emptiness, not a lack of joy, but the absence of truth. Because there's a version of you, quiet, buried, waiting, who never asked to be erased. A version who didn't need to be perfect, who didn't shrink to be loved, who didn't silence her truth just to make others comfortable. She's still there, under the layers, under the "I'm fine," under the pressure to hold it all together. And maybe the ache you feel is her knocking, not to destroy your life, but to free it, not to shame you, but to remind you. of the girl who laughed without checking the volume, of the boy who dreamed without apology, of the soul who showed up raw, real, whole. What if this mask was never really yours to wear? And what if taking it off isn't weakness, but the first act of coming home? So here's a question to sit with. Whose life are you living? And what would it take to live your own again? No more mirrors, no more theater, no more shrinking to fit spaces you were never meant to belong in. It's time to feel, to fall apart, to rebuild, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. Because your truth doesn't need to be beautiful, it just needs to be yours. Drop your mask for a moment. In the comments, write as if no one's watching. Tell me, what part of you have you hidden for too long? And what would it say if it could finally speak? This is your space. Say what you were never allowed to say. There are wounds that don't bleed. They just echo, quietly, constantly. A glance that made you feel invisible. A silence that screamed louder than words. A moment when someone should have held you, but didn't. These are the cuts no one sees. The ones you carry in your posture, in your pauses, in your eyes. And maybe you've learned how to hide them, to smile through the ache, to stay busy enough that the emptiness doesn't catch up, but it always does, in the quiet moments. When the noise fades and all that's left is you and the questions you've spent years avoiding. Why do I feel so numb? Why can't I connect? Why do I feel alone, even when I'm not? You try to diagnose it, depression, burnout. Maybe you're just broken. But what if it's none of those things? What if this isn't a flaw in your mind, but a fracture in your soul? Buddhist wisdom calls it dukkha, the ache of disconnection, the suffering born not from what's happening, but from resisting what is. And right now, what is that you're tired. Tired of holding it together. Tired of pretending you're okay. Tired of waiting for something or someone to save you. But here's the paradox. Sometimes the moment you break is the moment you finally begin to heal. Not because pain is noble, but because it strips away what was never real. In crisis, the masks fall. In loss, the noise fades. In heartbreak, your ego cracks. And for the first time, the truth has space to speak. Maybe the emptiness you feel is your soul grieving the years it spent asleep, grieving the love you gave without receiving, grieving the dreams you buried just to survive. And maybe it's not here to destroy you. Maybe this emptiness is a sacred teacher, a void not of absence, but of invitation, a chance to rebuild not from perfection, but from presence. Because pain, when faced, doesn't harden you, it humbles you, it quiets the ego, it softens the armor. And in that softness, you begin to hear something deeper, not the voice of your fear, but the voice of your becoming. You don't need to chase light. You are the light, covered in dust, yes, but never gone. So let the sadness come. Let the tears rise. Let the numbness speak. This is not weakness. This is witnessing. You're not falling apart. You're falling inward. And the pain, it's not the end. It's the path that leads back to the part of you that never left. The part that felt too much, that cared too deeply, that refused to go numb, even when the world said, you should. This is not about healing quickly. It's about finally feeling honestly. So if you're sitting in the dark right now, if your chest feels hollow and your smile feels fake, know this, you are not alone. And you are not broken. You are becoming, one breath at a time, one truth at a time, one quiet, painful, beautiful moment at a time. Let the ache shape you. Let the silence cleanse you. Let the empty space become the sacred ground where you remember who you've always been. We're taught that letting go means losing, that to release is to give up, that to stop holding on is weakness. But what if the opposite is true? What if letting go isn't the end of the story, but the moment you begin to write your own? Because when you've spent your whole life performing, carrying the weight of who you're supposed to be, you don't even realize how heavy it is until you finally set it down. At first, it feels terrifying, like walking a tightrope without a script. No applause, no validation. Just you, raw, unedited, unsure. But then something else emerges. Stillness, breath. A quiet freedom that doesn't need to be explained. Because now you're not chasing acceptance, you're reclaiming presence. And presence is not performance. It's not curated. It's not polished. It's messy, real, sacred. Imagine walking barefoot through your life. Not armored, not rehearsed, just present, with all your cracks and colors showing. That's what letting go truly is. It's not detachment from life. It's detachment from the lie that you need to earn love, that you need to prove your worth, that your value comes from being strong, agreeable, pleasing. The truth? You were enough before you knew how to pretend. You were worthy before they told you otherwise. And every time you let go of a version of you that was built for survival, you get closer to the version that was born for truth. It's not about abandoning everything. It's about unlearning the pressure, unlearning the roles, unlearning the belief that love is something you need to win. Because love, real love, doesn't require masks. It recognizes the soul, and the soul never needed editing. So let go. Let go of the timelines. Let go of the noise. Let go of the pressure to always be okay. You don't have to explain why you're tired. You don't have to justify your softness. You don't need a 5-step plan to return to yourself. Just stop running and feel the ground beneath you again. Because here's the paradox. The more you stop chasing who you should be, the more you start meeting who you've always been. The one who finds beauty in silence, who listens more than she speaks, who feels deeply, even when it hurts. This is not the kind of freedom they sell. It's quieter than that. It doesn't look good on a resume. It won't win you praise, but it will bring you peace. A peace that isn't about perfection, but about presence. So release the story that no longer feels like yours. Release the pressure to always have answers. Release the fear that if you stop holding it all together, you'll fall apart. Because maybe falling apart is the most honest thing you've ever done. And what rises after isn't a stronger mask. It's a softer soul. One that walks a little slower, breathes a little deeper, and no longer apologizes for taking up space. This is the freedom of letting go. Not to escape, but to finally arrive. There comes a moment when the noise stops. Not because you found the answers, but because you stopped asking the wrong questions. You stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start whispering, "What if there's nothing wrong at all?" This is the silence that heals. Not the silence of withdrawal or despair, but the kind that rises when you no longer need to fight yourself. Because maybe the emptiness wasn't a problem. Maybe it was space, sacred space, waiting for you to stop filling it with distractions and start listening. You thought you had to fix yourself, to become someone stronger, smarter, softer, to meditate more, to read more, to do more. But all this time, you were already whole, just hidden beneath the rubble of expectations, shame, and fear. You don't need to transcend yourself. You need to return, to sit in your body, to breathe in your skin, to hear your own voice again, the one that doesn't perform. The Buddhist path doesn't ask you to escape life. It invites you to enter it fully, not as a role, not as a mask, but as a witness. And when you witness your own experience, not judging, not fleeing, just being, something shifts. You begin to see your sadness not as a flaw, but as a signal. You begin to welcome your loneliness like an old friend, not something to push away, but something to understand. You realize the pain wasn't the prison, resisting the pain was. And the moment you stop resisting, you begin to rest. Not a surface level rest, but the kind that reaches your soul. The kind that says, you don't have to keep trying to be someone you're not. You can just stop. You can let the armor fall. You can breathe without pretending. You can cry without explanation. And that's where the healing begins. Not with more doing, but with surrender. Surrender to what is, to what hurts, to what has been buried for too long. Because the truth is, you were never too much. You were just around people who asked you to be less. You were never broken. You were just bending yourself into shapes that didn't fit your soul. And now, you're tired. Not because you're weak, but because you're finally done fighting to be what you're not. So what if this is the invitation? Not to rebuild, but to remember. Not to strive, but to soften. Not to chase a better version of you, but to accept the one who's been waiting inside all along. This is the practice, not escaping life, but being fully with it, as you are, messy, confused, beautiful, no fixing, just presence, no pretending, just permission, to feel it all, to want nothing, to be everything. And maybe, just maybe, what you've been calling emptiness was never the absence of life. It was life, finally quiet enough for you to hear it. So breathe, not to achieve, but to arrive, right here, right now, in this soft, sacred human moment. And ask yourself, not with fear, but with tenderness, what if everything I've been trying to become was always who I already am? And what if the only thing left to do is stop fighting it? Because peace doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sounds like your own heartbeat, finally heard. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it feels like home.